The clatter of dishes and murmur of conversation filled Vito's, the upscale Italian restaurant where I'd been working for the past 8 months. My fingers trembled slightly as I balanced 3 plates along my arm. A skill I'd perfected out of necessity rather than natural grace. The weight of the porcelain pressed against my skin, leaving temporary marks that would fade by morning, unlike the permanent exhaustion that had settled in my bones. Table 7, Ellie. And try not to spill anything this time. Marco, the floor manager, hissed as he passed, his cologne leaving a sickly sweet trail in his wake. I nodded, swallowing the knot in my throat. At 25, I should have been somewhere else, doing something that mattered. Instead, I was here, invisible, except when I made mistakes, trying to scrape together enough tips to pay for my mother's medications and our overdue rent. The restaurant dimmed momentarily as the front door opened, admitting a gust of October air that raised goosebumps along my exposed arms. I didn't look up, couldn't risk the distraction, but I felt it. A shift in the atmosphere, like the air before a storm. The usual restaurant buzz quieted to a reverent hush. I delivered the plates to a group of businessmen who barely acknowledged me, then turned back toward the kitchen. That's when I saw him. He sat alone at table 12, the restaurant's most private corner booth. Dark hair, perfectly styled, a suit that cost more than I made in months. But it was his eyes that stopped my breath. Dark as midnight, scanning the room with calculated precision, before settling on me with such intensity that I nearly stumbled. Behind him stood a broad-shouldered man, hands clasped in front, eyes hidden behind sunglasses despite the dim lighting. A bodyguard. Who needed a bodyguard in our quiet neighborhood? Ellie! Marco appeared beside me, his voice unnaturally soft. Mr. Castellano's table. Now. My stomach nodded. Everyone knew the name Castellano. Whispers about their family business traveled through Little Italy like wind through autumn leaves. Not the restaurant supply business listed on their sleek business cards, but the other business, the one that made people lower their voices and glance over their shoulders. Alessandro Castellano. 32 years old, and already head of the family after his father's mysterious heart attack 3 years ago. I'd seen his photo in the local paper, standing outside the courthouse after all charges were dropped against him in a case nobody would discuss. Move, Marco whispered, giving me a slight push. Each step toward his table felt like walking through deep water. When I reached him, I kept my eyes down, trained on the immaculate tablecloth. Good evening, sir. Welcome to Vito's. Can I get you something to drink? Look at me when you speak. His voice was quiet, smooth as aged whiskey, but with an edge that made it clear this wasn't a request. I raised my eyes slowly, heat crawling up my neck, up close. His features were even more striking. Sharp cheekbones, a strong jaw darkened with precisely maintained stubble, and those eyes, watching me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. Better, he said, his mouth curving into something not quite a smile. McAllen. Neat. I nodded and turned to leave, but his voice stopped me. Your name? Ellie, I whispered, then cleared my throat. Ellie Winters. He studied me for a moment longer, then dismissed me with the slightest nod. The night progressed in a blur of orders and exhaustion. I served Mr. Castellano with trembling hands, avoiding his gaze while feeling it follow me across the restaurant. When he finally left, I exhaled a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. As I cleared his table, I found it. A sleek black wallet, left casually beside his empty glass. My heart hammered against my ribs. Inside would be credit cards, ID, probably cash. More cash than I'd see in months. For one shameful moment, I thought about how that money could cover Mom's next prescription refill, the overdue electric bill, maybe even the rent we were 2 weeks behind on. The thought vanished as quickly as it had formed, shame burning my cheeks. I wasn't a thief. I'd never been a thief, even when we'd had nothing but ramen noodles for a week straight. I slipped the wallet into my apron pocket and found Marco. Mr. Castellano left his wallet. Do you have a contact number? Marco's eyes widened. Give it to me. I'll handle it. Something in his expression, a flicker of greed perhaps, made me hesitate. I can return it on my way home. Doesn't he live in that big house on Parkview? It's not far from my bus stop. Are you insane? Marco hissed. You don't just show up at Alessandro Castellano's house. Give me the wallet. I clutched it tighter. I'll take full responsibility. After my shift ended, I walked the 6 blocks to the Castellano mansion instead of catching the last bus home. The autumn night wrapped around me like a damp cloak, streetlights casting long shadows across cracked sidewalks. By the time I reached the imposing gates, my resolve was wavering. A security camera swiveled toward me as I approached the intercom. Before I could press the button, the gate swung open silently. They'd been watching me all along. The driveway stretched before me, lined with perfectly manicured trees. The house itself loomed at the end, a modernized Victorian with warm lights glowing from within. My footsteps crunched on the gravel, each sound magnifying my anxiety. The massive front door opened before I reached it. The same bodyguard from the restaurant stood there, expressionless. I found Mr. Castellano's wallet, I stammered, holding it out like an offering. Inside. The bodyguard stepped aside. Every instinct told me to run, but I stepped into the warm foyer, my waitress uniform painfully out of place against the marble floors and crystal chandelier. The bodyguard led me through the house to a study where Alessandro Castellano sat behind a massive desk, jacketless now, the sleeves of his crisp white shirt rolled up to reveal strong forearms. "Miss Winters," he said, as if my arrival was both expected and amusing. "You've brought something of mine." I stepped forward, placing the wallet on his desk. "You left it at the restaurant, sir, and you brought it all the way here, when you could have kept it." He opened the wallet. Thumbing through what I now saw was a thick stack of $100 bills. "Most would have." "I'm not a thief," I said, the words coming out sharper than I intended. Something flickered in his dark eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or approval. He removed a bill and held it out to me. "For your honesty." "No, thank you." I stepped back, my calves hitting a leather chair behind me. His eyebrows rose fractionally. "You refuse my money." "I didn't return it for a reward." A smile spread slowly across his face, transforming his features from merely handsome to devastating. "Then why did you return it, Ellie Winters?" "Because it was the right thing to do," I said simply. He leaned back in his chair, studying me with renewed interest. "The right thing," he repeated, as if testing the concept. "Do you know who I am? What I do?" My mouth went dry. "You're Alessandro Castellano. You own the restaurant supply business." He laughed then, a rich sound that seemed to fill the room. "Is that what you think?" He stood, walking around the desk until he was standing directly in front of me. Sweet, innocent Ellie. "Do you always do the right thing, even when it costs you?" I thought of my mother's medicine, our looming eviction. I tried to. He reached out, his fingers brushing a strand of hair from my face. I froze, heart racing like a trapped bird. "Fascinating," he murmured. "Vincent will drive you home. I can take the bus." It wasn't a suggestion. His tone remained pleasant, but steel ran beneath the surface. Before I could respond, the study door opened, and a striking woman entered. Tall, model thin, with cascading dark hair and lips painted blood red. She stopped when she saw me, her perfectly shaped eyebrows arching. "Am I interrupting, Alessandro?" Her voice was honey poured over ice. "Sophia." Something hardened in his expression. "I wasn't expecting you tonight." Her gaze slid over me, assessing and dismissing in one cool glance. "Clearly. This is Ellie. She works at Vito's and was kind enough to return my wallet." He said it casually, but I heard the warning in his tone. How charitable. Sophia's smile didn't reach her eyes. "I didn't realize you'd started collecting strays." Heat flooded my face. I took a step toward the door. I should go. Alessandro's hand caught my wrist, his grip firm but not painful. "Vincent will see you home safely, Ellie. I insist." He turned to Sophia, his expression cooling. "We'll talk tomorrow." The dismissal was clear. Sophia's perfect features tightened momentarily before she composed herself, offering a brittle smile. "Of course, darling. Call me." She brushed past me, leaving a cloud of expensive perfume in her wake. Alessandro released my wrist, but remained close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body. "Thank you for your honesty tonight, Ellie Winters. It's refreshing." Something in his gaze made me feel like I'd passed a test I hadn't known I was taking. The ride home in his sleek black SUV was silent, the bodyguard, Vincent, never speaking a word. He pulled up to my rundown apartment building, the vehicle looking absurdly out of place on our potholed street. "Good night, Miss Winters," Vincent finally spoke, his voice surprisingly gentle. "Mr. Castellano appreciates what you did tonight." I nodded, climbing out of the warm car into the chilly night. As I fumbled for my keys at the building's entrance, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just stepped into something much bigger than returning a lost wallet, something I might not be able to simply walk away from. What I didn't know then, as I climbed the stairs to our third-floor apartment, was that Alessandro Castellano never lost anything by accident, and he never ever let go of something or someone once he decided they belonged to him. Mom was asleep when I entered our apartment, the rhythmic wheeze of her breathing audible from the small bedroom we'd converted to accommodate her hospital bed. The home health aide had left a note on our chipped Formica counter. "Took meds at 8. Ate half sandwich. Fever down." I sank onto our threadbare couch, the events of the evening replaying in my mind like a movie I couldn't pause. Alessandro Castellano's penetrating gaze, the weight of his grip on my wrist, the contempt in Sophia's eyes as she looked at me, looked through me, like I was nothing. Sleep came fitfully that night, dark eyes haunting my dreams. The next morning arrived with a thin October rain that turned the city streets slick and gray. I dragged myself through my morning routine, made Mom comfortable with fresh pillows and her medication, then headed out for my second job at the corner cafe. "You look like hell warmed over," said Danny, my only real friend and coworker, as I tied my apron behind the counter. "Rough night," I mumbled, not meeting her eyes. Something stopped me from sharing my encounter with Alessandro. Saying it aloud would make it real, and I wanted to pretend it had been nothing more than an odd interruption to my otherwise unremarkable life. The morning rush kept us busy, the steady stream of commuters ordering their usual coffees before disappearing into the rain. By 11, the cafe had emptied to just a few students with laptops and a businessman on his phone. The bell above the door chimed, and I looked up from wiping down the counter. My heart stuttered. Vincent stood in the doorway, scanning the cafe before his gaze landed on me. His presence seemed to shrink the small space, making the cheerful yellow walls close in. He approached the counter, his expression unreadable behind dark sunglasses. "Miss Winters." He nodded slightly. "Mr. Castellano would like to see you." Danny, suddenly beside me, raised her eyebrows. "Who's Mr. Castellano?" she whispered, too loudly. "No one," I said quickly. To Vincent, I added, "I'm working until 3. Mr. Castellano is aware of your schedule. He'll be waiting outside at 3:15. It wasn't a request. Before I could respond, Vincent placed something on the counter, a small white box tied with a simple black ribbon. Then he turned and left, the bell signaling his departure with a cheerful jingle that seemed at odds with the weight that had settled in my stomach. "Ellie, what the hell?" Danny stared at me, then at the box. Who was that? And who's Mr. Castellano? Just someone from the restaurant. I touched the box cautiously, as if it might bite. "A customer? Leaving you gifts and sending his personal bouncer to fetch you?" Danny's eyes widened. "Is he married? Because this has mistress setup written all over it." "It's not like that," I protested, though I had no idea what it was. "He probably just wants to thank me for returning his wallet." "His wallet." Danny grabbed my arm. "Start talking. Now." I gave her an abbreviated version as we worked, careful to downplay both Alessandro's obvious power and my own unsettling reaction to him. Still, by the time 3 o'clock approached, Danny was practically vibrating with excitement. "You have to open the box," she insisted during our final lull. With trembling fingers, I untied the ribbon and lifted the lid. Inside, nestled on a bed of tissue paper, lay a delicate silver bracelet, a small charm dangling from it. I lifted it carefully, examining the charm. A tiny silver wallet, its detail exquisite. "Oh my God," Danny breathed. "That's white gold, Ellie. And that's not just any charm." Tucked beneath the bracelet was a handwritten note on thick cream cardstock. A reminder of our first meeting, AC. I can't accept this. I placed the bracelet back in its box, my skin burning where it had touched me. Are you insane? That bracelet could pay your mom's medical bills for a month. Exactly why I can't take it. I closed the box firmly. I don't want to owe him anything. At 3:15, I stood outside the cafe, the small box clutched in my hand, watching the sleek black SUV pull to the curb. The rear door opened, and there he was, Alessandro Castellano, even more imposing in daylight. He wore a charcoal suit that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders, no tie, his collar open just enough to reveal a glimpse of tanned skin. "Ellie," he said, my name rolling off his tongue like he was tasting it. "Join me." I hesitated, rain soaking through my thin jacket. "Please," he added, though it didn't sound like he was accustomed to using the word. I slid into the warm interior of the car, hyper-aware of the contrast between his immaculate appearance and my rain-dampened cafe uniform. The leather seat enveloped me, soft as butter. Vincent closed the door and took his place in the driver's seat, a privacy partition gliding up silently between us. "You didn't open your gift," Alessandro observed, nodding at the box in my hands. "I did, actually." I held it out to him. "I can't accept it." His eyes narrowed slightly. "Why not?" "It's too expensive." I swallowed. "And inappropriate." "Inappropriate?" A smile played at the corners of his mouth. "It's a thank you gift, nothing more." We both know that's not true. The words escaped before I could stop them. Instead of anger, surprise flickered across his face, followed by what looked like approval. "You're not what I expected, Ellie Winters." "What did you expect?" "Someone who would take the wallet, or if they returned it, someone who would eagerly accept whatever I offered in return." He leaned forward slightly. "Someone easily bought." The car moved smoothly through traffic, rain streaking the tinted windows, creating a private world within. I was acutely aware of how alone we were, despite Vincent's presence beyond the partition. "I'm not for sale," I said quietly. Alessandro studied me, his gaze intense. "Everyone has a price. Some just require more creative negotiations." "Why am I here, Mr. Castellano?" "Alessandro," he corrected, "and you're here because I find you interesting." "Do you know how rare that is?" Heat crept up my neck. "I'm really not. I'm just a waitress with 2 jobs and a sick mother." Something in his expression shifted. "Tell me about her." The request caught me off guard. "My mother?" He nodded, waiting. "She has multiple sclerosis," I said, the familiar pain settling in my chest. "It's progressing quickly. She can't work anymore, can barely leave her bed most days." "And her medical care? Insurance?" I laughed bitterly. "Our insurance dropped her when she couldn't work. We're drowning in medical debt." "And your father?" "Left when I was 12, when Mom first got sick." The old anger flared briefly. "Couldn't handle it, I guess." Alessandro's jaw tightened, a muscle flexing beneath his skin. "A man who abandons his family is not a man at all." The vehemence in his voice surprised me. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The only sound the gentle purr of the engine and rain against the windows. "I have a proposition for you," he finally said, his voice carefully controlled. My body tensed. "I'm not that kind of proposition." A flash of irritation crossed his features. "I need a personal assistant, someone I can trust." I blinked. "You just met me. And in that brief encounter, you've proven more trustworthy than people I've known for years." He leaned back, regarding me coolly. "The position pays $15,000 a month, plus benefits. Full medical coverage, which would extend to your mother as dependents." The figure hit me like a physical blow. $15,000 a month was more than I made in half a year. Medical coverage for Mom would mean no more choosing between rent and her medications. "What would this assistant position entail?" I asked cautiously. "Managing my schedule, handling correspondence, attending events with me when necessary." His eyes held mine. "Nothing inappropriate, unless you wish it to be." Heat flooded my face at the implication. "I don't—" "Relax, Ellie." His smile was knowing. "I'm not hiring you for your body, tempting as it may be. I'm hiring you for your integrity." I clutched the gift box tighter, my mind racing. It was too good to be true, which meant there had to be a catch. "What's the real job, Alessandro?" Because I'm not doing anything illegal. He laughed, the sound rich and genuine, so quick to assume the worst. The job is exactly as I described, though I won't pretend my business dealings are always conventional. You mean criminal, I said bluntly. His eyes darkened. I mean necessary. This city runs on connections and power, Ellie. I simply understand the system better than most. The car slowed, and I realized we'd been circling the city with no particular destination. Alessandro pressed a button, and the partition lowered slightly. Vincent, take us to St. Mary's Hospital. My heart jumped. Why are we going there? To see your mother's doctor. His tone made it clear this wasn't negotiable. Before you make any decisions, I want you to understand exactly what I'm offering. The hospital corridors were blindingly white after the dim interior of the car. Alessandro moved with purpose, his presence parting the crowds like a blade through water. No one questioned why he was there or how he knew exactly where to go. Within minutes, we were seated in the office of Dr. Reynolds, Mom's neurologist whom I'd met only twice. Appointments were expensive, and he was perpetually overbooked. Mr. Castellano. Dr. Reynolds stood as we entered, his expression a mixture of respect and wariness. This is unexpected. I apologize for the intrusion. Alessandro's tone suggested he was anything but sorry. I'd like to discuss Elena Winter's case. Dr. Reynolds glanced at me, then back at Alessandro. I'd need her daughter's permission to discuss. I'm her daughter, I interrupted. It's okay. What followed was the most comprehensive discussion of Mom's condition I'd ever had. Dr. Reynolds explained treatment options I'd never heard of, specialists I couldn't afford, medications that might slow the progression, but were too expensive for our budget. Throughout it all, Alessandro listened intently, asking pointed questions that revealed a surprising knowledge of MS treatments. By the end, a plan had been outlined, one that included a team of specialists, home health care, and cutting-edge treatments. We can begin immediately, Dr. Reynolds said, looking not at me, but at Alessandro. Excellent. Alessandro stood, buttoning his jacket. Send all paperwork to my office. Outside the doctor's office, I stopped, feeling lightheaded. How did you— Money opens doors, Ellie, and I have plenty of it. He placed a hand at the small of my back, guiding me toward the elevator. The treatment plan starts tomorrow, whether you take the job or not. Consider it a gift. I can't let you— You can, he interrupted. And you will. Pride is admirable, but not at the expense of your mother's health. In the elevator, he stood closer than necessary, his cologne, something expensive and subtle, filling my senses. Think of it this way. If you take the job, you're earning your mother's care. If not, then yes, you're accepting charity from a man you barely know. The elevator doors opened to the parking garage where Vincent waited with the car. I need time to think, I said, as Alessandro opened the car door for me. Of course. He followed me into the back seat. You have until tomorrow morning. I'll send Vincent at 9. The rest of the ride passed in silence, my mind too overwhelmed to form coherent thoughts. When we reached my apartment building, Alessandro surprised me by exiting the car with me. I don't need an escort to my door, I said, clutching my purse like a shield. Humor me. His hand returned to the small of my back, a subtle but unmistakable claim. At my door, I turned to face him, suddenly aware of how close he stood, how the dim hallway light caught the angles of his face. Why me? I asked, the question that had been burning since his proposition. You could hire anyone. Someone with experience, education. I have dozens of experienced, educated employees. He reached out, his fingers lightly tracing my jawline. What I lack is someone who looks at me, knows who I am and what I'm capable of, and still tells me no. My breath caught as his thumb brushed my lower lip. Like you're doing right now, with your body saying yes and your words saying wait. Before I could respond, he stepped back. 9 o'clock tomorrow, Ellie. Don't make me come looking for you. As he walked away, I noticed a shadow at the end of the hallway. Another of his men, no doubt, stationed to watch my door. Alessandro Castellano was a man who protected what he considered his, and somehow, without my consent or understanding, I had become exactly that. I spent that night in a state of suspended disbelief, watching Mom sleep peacefully for the first time in weeks thanks to the new medication doctor. Reynolds had prescribed medication that had appeared at our door via courier an hour after Alessandro left. The package also contained a sleek new phone with only one contact programmed into it, his. By morning, I'd made my decision. Not because of the money, though God knows we needed it, but because I'd seen something in Alessandro's eyes when he spoke of family. A flicker of genuine feeling beneath the calculated control. That glimpse of humanity gave me hope that working for him wouldn't mean selling my soul entirely. At precisely 9 o'clock, a knock came at my door. Vincent stood in the hallway, as expressionless as ever. "He's waiting," was all he said. 30 minutes later, I entered the Castellano estate for the second time, now led to a different room. An airy office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking immaculately landscaped gardens. Alessandro stood by a glass desk, speaking rapidly in Italian to someone on the phone. He wore a navy suit today, the fabric catching the morning light, making him look almost approachable. Almost. He ended the call when I entered, his eyes taking in my appearance, the simple black dress I'd worn to interviews before, my hair pulled back in a neat ponytail, minimal makeup. I'd tried to look professional, though I knew my bargain clothes couldn't compare to even the casual wear of someone like Sophia. "Ellie," he said, the hint of a smile playing at his lips. "You've made your decision." It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. "Yes, I'll take the job." "Excellent." He gestured to a chair across from his desk. "Sit, we have details to discuss." For the next hour, Alessandro outlined what working for him would entail. I would manage his schedule, coordinate with his business associates, attend meetings and social functions as needed. My days would start early and often end late. I would have an apartment in his building downtown. "For convenience," he said, though we both knew it was for control. "What about my mother?" I asked. "Already arranged. A private nurse will live in your current apartment to provide round-the-clock care. You can visit whenever you wish." I swallowed hard. "And the nature of your business? What exactly will I be coordinating?" His expression didn't change, but something in his eyes hardened slightly. "My legitimate businesses, restaurants, shipping, real estate. The rest doesn't concern you, but I'll be involved in it. Adjacent to it," he corrected. "You won't be asked to do anything illegal, Ellie. I protect what's mine." The possessive statement hung between us, its implications clear. By accepting this position, I was agreeing to belong to him in some nebulous way neither of us was defining aloud. When would I start? Now. He slid a folder across the desk. "These are your contracts. Employment, confidentiality, benefits. Read them carefully." The documents were dense with legal language, but the terms were exactly as he'd described. Better, even. Full medical for Mom and me, a salary that made my eyes widen. A clause that specified my right to resign with 30 days' notice. Though something told me leaving wouldn't be as simple as the contract suggested, I signed, feeling as though I was signing away more than just my employment status. "Welcome to the family, Ellie," Alessandro said, taking the pen from my fingers, his hand lingering against mine longer than necessary. The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind of new experiences. I moved into the downtown apartment, a sleek, modern space that could have housed my entire previous apartment 3 times over. Mom's care improved dramatically, her new nurse sending me daily updates and photos of small improvements in her condition. Working for Alessandro was both simpler and more complex than I'd imagined. He was demanding but fair, expecting perfection, but willing to teach. I quickly learned his preferences. Black coffee in the morning, green tea in the afternoon, which calls to put through immediately, and which could wait. How to recognize when his calm demeanor masked rising anger. I also learned about the other side of his business. Not through direct involvement, but through overheard conversations, abruptly ended when I entered rooms, the way certain visitors were shown directly to his private study while others were kept waiting. "You're adapting well," Alessandro commented one evening, as we worked late in his office, reviewing plans for a charity gala he was hosting. 2 months into my employment, and I was still discovering new aspects of his complicated life. "I'm trying," I said, not looking up from my tablet where I was finalizing the seating arrangements. "The mayor's wife called again," I continued. "She's insisting on being seated at your table." Alessandro made a dismissive gesture. "Put her at table 3 with the police commissioner. Her husband will understand the message." I made the change, trying not to think about what message was being sent. This was the delicate dance of my new existence. Knowing enough to do my job efficiently without examining the implications too closely. "You're going to need a dress," he said suddenly. I looked up, confused. "For what?" "The gala. You'll be attending with me." My stomach tightened. "As your assistant." His eyes met mine, dark and unreadable, as my companion. "I don't think that's appropriate," I said carefully. "Appropriate?" A smile curved his lips. "You've been living in an apartment I provide, working exclusively for me, seeing no one but me for weeks." The line of appropriate was crossed long ago. Heat crept up my neck. "I've maintained professional boundaries." "Have you?" He stood, moving around the desk until he was standing directly in front of me, close enough that I could smell his cologne. "Then why do you blush when I stand this close? Why do your pupils dilate when I touch you like this?" His fingers brushed my cheek, a gossamer touch that nonetheless sent electricity coursing through me. "That's biology," I managed, hating how breathless I sounded. "Not consent." Something flickered in his expression. Frustration, respect, desire, before he stepped back. "Tomorrow, you'll find several dresses delivered to your apartment. Choose whichever you prefer for the gala. The event begins at 8. We'll leave at 7:30. Just like that. The moment was over, and he was my employer again. This pattern had repeated throughout our weeks together. Moments of dangerous attraction followed by careful retreats behind professional walls. The following evening, I stood in my apartment surrounded by garment bags from designers, whose names I recognized from magazines. Each dress inside was more exquisite than the last, and each, I noticed, with both embarrassment and a secret thrill, was perfectly tailored to my measurements. I chose the least revealing option. A floor-length gown in deep emerald that hugged my curves, but maintained some semblance of modesty with its high neckline. The color made my pale skin glow, and brought out the green in my hazel eyes. At exactly 7:30, Alessandro arrived at my door. He wore a black tuxedo that fit him like armor, emphasizing the breadth of his shoulders and the lean strength of his body. For a moment, he simply stared at me, his expression unreadable. "You look beautiful," he said finally, his voice rougher than usual. "Thank you." I smoothed a hand over the silk of my dress, suddenly self-conscious. "Is it appropriate for the event?" "It's perfect." He offered his arm. "Shall we?" The gala was held at the city's most exclusive hotel, its ballroom transformed into a winter wonderland for the Children's Hospital fundraiser. As we entered, I was acutely aware of the eyes that followed us. Curious, envious, speculative. "Alessandro!" A silver-haired man approached, clapping Alessandro on the shoulder with the familiarity of long acquaintance. "And who is this vision?" "Judge Harrington." Alessandro nodded. "This is Eleanor Winters, my—" "Date for the evening," I finished, unwilling to be labeled as his assistant, or something more possessive. Alessandro's grip on my waist tightened fractionally, a subtle warning I chose to ignore. "Enchanting," the judge said, kissing my hand with old-world courtesy. "Alessandro, you've been holding out on us." "Where have you been hiding this lovely creature?" "She's not hidden," Alessandro replied, his voice pleasant but with an underlying edge. "Just precious enough to protect." The possessiveness in his tone should have offended me. Instead, it sent a forbidden thrill down my spine. As the evening progressed, I met more of Alessandro's associates. Politicians, business owners, and others whose connections to him seemed more ambiguous. I played my role carefully, charming when needed, silent when appropriate, always aware of Alessandro's watchful presence. "You're a natural at this," he murmured as we moved between groups. "Everyone is captivated." "I'm just smiling and nodding," I replied. "You're disarming them, making them comfortable enough to reveal things they normally wouldn't." His approval was evident. "It's a rare skill." Before I could respond, a commotion near the entrance drew our attention. Sophia had arrived, stunning in a red dress that clung to her willowy frame like a second skin. Her gaze swept the room until it locked on us, her perfect smile faltering for just a moment before reasserting itself. "Your girlfriend's here," I said lightly, trying to ignore the unexpected pang of jealousy. Alessandro's expression darkened. "Sophia is not my girlfriend. She's the daughter of a business associate who has unrealistic expectations. As if summoned by our attention, Sophia glided toward us, her red lips curved in a predatory smile. "Alessandro, darling." She air-kissed both his cheeks, then turned to me with barely concealed contempt. "And the little waitress. How quaint." "Eleanor is my date this evening, Sophia," Alessandro said, his tone pleasant but firm. Sophia laughed, the sound like breaking glass. "Oh, is that what we're calling it now?" I wondered what position she'd filled when Maria mentioned your new assistant. She ran a manicured finger down Alessandro's lapel. "You always did have a weakness for charity cases." Anger flashed hot in my chest, but before I could respond, Alessandro caught Sophia's wrist, removing her hand from his chest with controlled precision. "Careful, Sophia," he said quietly, his voice carrying a warning that made even my skin prickle. "You're making a scene." Her perfect features tightened. "Don't be ridiculous, Alessandro. Everyone knows this is just another of your games. She'll be gone in a month, just like the others." The others? My stomach clenched. Had there been other women like me, plucked from obscurity for reasons I still didn't fully understand? "You should find your father," Alessandro suggested, his tone making it clear this wasn't a suggestion at all. "I believe he's looking for you." For a moment, Sophia looked as if she might argue, but something in Alessandro's expression made her reconsider. With a final contemptuous glance at me, she turned and disappeared into the crowd. "I apologize for her behavior," Alessandro said, his hand returning to the small of my back. "Sophia and I, there's history there, but not the kind she wants it to be." "Were there others?" I asked quietly, hating the vulnerability in my voice. "Other women you've hired as assistants?" His eyes locked on mine. "No, not like you. Like me, how?" Before he could answer, Vincent appeared at his side, leaning in to whisper something urgently. Alessandro's expression hardened instantly, the charming host vanishing behind a mask of cold calculation. "Take care of it," he instructed Vincent, then turned to me. "I need to step away briefly. Business matter. Is everything okay?" "Nothing for you to worry about." He brushed his thumb across my cheekbone, the gesture at odds with the coldness in his eyes. "Wait for me here. Don't wander." As Alessandro disappeared with Vincent, I felt suddenly exposed without his protective presence. I moved to a quieter corner of the ballroom, sipping champagne and trying to look as though I belonged. "So you're Alessandro's new toy," a voice said beside me. I turned to find a man watching me with undisguised interest, young, expensively dressed, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I'm his assistant," I corrected. "Of course you are." The man's gaze traveled over me in a way that made me want to cover myself. "I'm Michael Russo. Alessandro and I have mutual interests." Something about the way he said it raised warning flags. I maintained a polite smile. "It's nice to meet you, Mr. Russo." "Michael, please." He moved closer. "You know, working for Alessandro can be intense. If you ever need a friend, someone to talk to about the pressures of the job." He slid a business card into my hand, his fingers lingering against my palm. Before I could respond, a familiar voice cut through the air like a blade. "Michael." Alessandro's hand landed possessively on my waist. "I see you've met Eleanor." The temperature between the men seemed to drop 10 degrees instantly. Michael straightened, his demeanor shifting from predatory to cautious. "Just introducing myself," he said, raising his hands in mock surrender. "No harm intended, I'm sure." Alessandro's voice was deadly quiet. "But Eleanor is with me, exclusively." The meaning couldn't have been clearer if he'd branded me in front of everyone. Michael nodded, backing away with a final glance at me that held both warning and pity. "What was that about?" I asked when Michael was out of earshot. Alessandro's fingers tightened at my waist. "Michael Russo is not someone you want to know, Ellie. He's dangerous. And you're not?" His eyes met mine, dark and intense. "I would never hurt you." He would without hesitation if he thought it would hurt me. The admission that hurting me would hurt him hung between us, heavy with implications neither of us was ready to address. "I want to go home," I said suddenly, the glamour of the evening tarnished by Sophia's contempt. Michael's predatory interest, and the realization that I was playing a game whose rules I didn't fully understand. Alessandro studied me for a moment, then nodded. "I'll have Vincent bring the car around." The ride back to my apartment was silent, tension filling the space between us. When we arrived, Alessandro surprised me by exiting the car with me. "You don't need to see me up," I said, fumbling for my keys. "I do." His tone brooked no argument. In the elevator, he finally spoke again. "You're upset." "I'm confused," I corrected, "about what exactly my role is in your life." Sophia seemed to think. "Sophia knows nothing about us," he interrupted. "Is there an us?" I challenged as the elevator doors opened to my floor. Alessandro followed me to my apartment door, waiting as I unlocked it. Once inside, he closed the door behind us, the sound oddly final. "There has been an us from the moment you walked into my study with my wallet," he said, his voice low and intense. "From the moment you looked me in the eye and refused my money, refused to be bought." He moved closer, backing me against the wall, his arms caging me in. "Do you have any idea how rare that is in my world? People either fear me or want something from me. You did neither." My heart hammered against my ribs, his proximity making it hard to think clearly. "I still don't want anything from you." "Don't you?" His fingers traced the line of my jaw, tilting my face up to his. "I think you want exactly what I want, Ellie. You're just afraid to admit it." "And what do you want?" My voice was barely a whisper. "You." The word hung between us, laden with meaning. "Not just your body, though God knows I want that too. I want your honesty, your defiance, your stubborn integrity that makes you return wallets and refuse gifts." His thumb brushed across my lower lip. "I want the woman who looks at a monster like me and still sees something worth saving." "You're not a monster," I whispered, though we both knew there was darkness in him I'd only glimpsed. "No?" His smile was bitter. "You don't know the things I've done, Ellie. The things I'm capable of. Then tell me." I placed my hand against his chest, feeling his heartbeat strong and steady beneath expensive fabric. "Show me who you really are." For a moment, the mask slipped, and I saw raw vulnerability in his eyes, a flicker of the boy he must have been before life shaped him into the dangerous man before me. Then his lips were on mine, the kiss burning away all thoughts of caution. His hands tangled in my hair, cradling my head as if I were something precious, even as his body pressed mine against the wall with unmistakable hunger. I should have pushed him away, should have maintained the boundaries I'd insisted on for weeks. Instead, my arms wound around his neck, drawing him closer as the kiss deepened, tasting of champagne and forbidden desires. When we finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, the look in his eyes was one of triumphant possession. "Tell me to leave," he said roughly, his forehead pressed against mine. "Tell me now, or I won't be able to stop." In that moment, balanced on the knife's edge between safety and surrender, I made my choice. "Stay," I whispered against his lips, sealing my fate with a single word. Morning light filtered through unfamiliar curtains, painting golden stripes across tangled sheets. For a moment, disorientation gripped me. This wasn't my bedroom, wasn't my bed. Then memories flooded back in a rush of sensations. Alessandro's hands mapping every inch of my skin, his voice rough with desire as he whispered my name, the surprising gentleness with which he'd held me afterward. I turned, finding the space beside me empty but still warm. The sound of quiet conversation drifted from the living room, Alessandro's voice, low and commanding even when speaking softly. Business never stopped, it seemed, even at dawn after a night like ours. I slipped from the bed, wrapping myself in the silk robe that had mysteriously appeared in my closet weeks ago, one of many items Alessandro had provided without comment. As if preparing for this inevitable moment, the thought should have disturbed me more than it did. In the living room, Alessandro stood by the window, phone pressed to his ear, his powerful frame silhouetted against the city skyline. He wore only his trousers from last night, torso bare, revealing the intricate tattoo that spread across his left shoulder blade, a stylized lion I now knew, symbol of his family's crest. Scars I hadn't noticed in the darkness also mapped his skin, telling stories of violence I wasn't sure I wanted to hear. He turned as I entered, his eyes darkening with appreciation. Without breaking his conversation, he extended his free arm, drawing me against his side as he continued speaking in rapid Italian. I allowed myself to be held, still too raw from the night's intimacy to remember why this closeness should frighten me. When he finally ended the call, he set the phone aside and turned fully toward me, his hands settling at my waist. "Good morning." His voice was rough, intimate. "Morning," I replied, suddenly shy despite everything we'd shared hours before. "Regrets?" he asked, his expression revealing nothing. I considered lying, then remembered his uncanny ability to read me. "I don't know yet." A smile curved his lips, not the cold, calculated one he showed the world, but something warmer, almost boyish. Honest as always. His thumb traced my lower lip, still slightly swollen from his kisses. "I have meetings this morning. I'd cancel them if I could." "I'm your assistant," I reminded him, stepping back slightly. "I know your schedule." His eyes narrowed at the deliberate distance I placed between us. "Is that all you are now, Ellie? My assistant?" The question hung between us, demanding definition for something I wasn't ready to name. "I don't know what I am," I admitted. "This changes things." "Nothing has changed," he said with absolute certainty. "This was inevitable from the moment we met. We both know that." Before I could argue, his phone rang again. He checked the screen, his expression hardening. "I have to take this. We'll continue this discussion later." It wasn't a request. After he left, I stood in the shower for a long time, hot water cascading over my skin, washing away the physical evidence of the night while doing nothing to clear the confusion in my mind. I had crossed a line, one I had promised myself I wouldn't cross, and now I was in territory without maps. At the office, Alessandro's private study in the downtown high-rise where most of his legitimate businesses operated, I maintained a professional demeanor, even as I caught his heated glances when others weren't looking. If his staff noticed the shift in our dynamic, they were too well trained to comment. Days passed in this new reality. Nights spent in Alessandro's arms, days maintaining the facade of employer and employee. I learned the contours of his body as intimately as I'd learned his business preferences, discovered the rare vulnerability that appeared only in the darkness of his bedroom, when the masks we both wore could be set aside. But I also began to see more of the darker side of his world, meetings I wasn't invited to, whispered conversations that ceased when I entered rooms, the way certain names made his expression turn cold and remote. "You need to be careful around Russo," Alessandro said one evening, as we reviewed documents in his study. The comment seemed to come from nowhere, jarring in the quiet routine we'd established. I looked up, frowning. "Michael Russo? I haven't seen him since the gala. He's been asking about you." Alessandro's voice was casual, but tension radiated from his posture. "Trying to find connections to you, people who knew you before." A chill ran down my spine. Why would he do that? To find leverage. Alessandro set down his pen, fixing me with a steady gaze. "He thinks you're important to me. Am I?" The question slipped out before I could stop it. Alessandro's expression softened marginally. "You know you are." "No, I don't," I said, setting aside my tablet. "I know I work for you. I know I sleep with you. I don't know what that means to you, or what I am to you beyond those functions." "Functions?" A dangerous edge entered his voice. "Is that how you see what's between us? Functional?" "How should I see it? You've never defined it." Frustration colored my words, and I'm starting to think that's deliberate. Alessandro stood abruptly, stalking around the desk until he loomed over me. "You want definitions? Fine. You are mine, Ellie. Mine to protect, mine to care for, mine to—" He trailed off, something like surprise crossing his features, as if he'd nearly revealed more than intended. "To what?" I pressed, standing to meet his gaze more directly. "To love," he finished, the word hanging in the air between us like a live grenade. I stepped back, shock coursing through me. "You don't love me. You barely know me." "I know everything about you," he countered. "Your favorite color is green, not because it's trendy, but because it reminds you of the park where your father used to take you before he left. You bite your lip when you're concentrating." You saved the crusts of your sandwiches for last, because your mother taught you the crust contained all the nutrients. You still sent her teacher a card every Christmas, even though you were only in her class for 1 year, because she was kind to you when other children weren't. My breath caught. How? Because I've been watching you since long before you found my wallet, Ellie. The admission was quiet, almost reluctant. The wallet wasn't lost. It was a test. One you passed when hundreds before you failed. The ground seemed to shift beneath my feet. You were testing me. Why? Alessandro's jaw tightened. Because I needed someone I could trust absolutely. Someone with integrity that couldn't be bought. For what? Dread pooled in my stomach. What do you really want from me, Alessandro? Before he could answer, a sharp knock came at the door. Vincent entered without waiting for permission, his normally impassive expression tense. Sir, we have a situation. The shipment at the docks. Alessandro's demeanor changed instantly, all traces of the vulnerable man who'd spoken of love vanishing behind the cold mask of the businessman, or something darker. Secure the building. No one in or out. And get the car ready. Vincent nodded, withdrawing immediately. What's happening? I asked, fear creeping into my voice. Business, Alessandro replied curtly, already moving toward a hidden panel in the wall that, when opened, revealed a small safe. He withdrew a gun, checking it with practiced efficiency before tucking it into a shoulder holster. Alessandro, go to the penthouse, he instructed, shrugging into his jacket. Vincent's men will escort you. Stay there until I come for you. I'm not a child to be sent to my room, I protested. Tell me what's happening. His eyes met mine, cold and distant in a way I hadn't seen since those first days. This is the part of my life you don't get to question, Ellie. The part you pretend doesn't exist so you can sleep at night. The words stung with their brutal honesty. I never pretended, didn't you? He approached, cupping my face with deceptive gentleness. You've seen the signs, heard the whispers. You're too intelligent not to have pieced it together. But you've chosen not to ask, not to know for certain, because knowing would make you complicit. He was right, I realized with a sinking feeling. I had deliberately avoided confirming what I already suspected about the true nature of his business, about who he really was. Go to the penthouse, he repeated, softer now. Please, I need to know you're safe while I handle this. Something in his tone, genuine concern beneath the command, made me nod. Will you be in danger? A ghost of a smile touched his lips. I'm not the one they should be worried about. 2 of Alessandro's men escorted me to the private elevator that led to the penthouse apartment occupying the building's top floor, a space I'd visited only a handful of times, as Alessandro preferred to come to my apartment, claiming it felt more like a home than his austere domain. Hours passed in tense silence, as I paced the vast space, watching the city lights bloom as dusk settled. My phone remained silent, despite multiple attempts to reach Alessandro. Even Vincent, usually responsive to my texts, had gone dark. It was past midnight when I heard the elevator doors slide open. I rushed to the foyer, relief flooding me until I saw the figure that emerged. Not Alessandro, but Michael Russo, flanked by 2 unfamiliar men whose bulky jackets undoubtedly concealed weapons. Hello, Eleanor, Michael said pleasantly, as if this were a social call. I hope I'm not interrupting your evening. Ice flooded my veins. How did you get up here? I have friends in many places, he replied, advancing into the room, including some who owe me more than they owe Alessandro. I backed away, reaching for my phone. I'm calling security. They won't answer, Michael said confidently. Everyone who matters in this building is currently dealing with a rather explosive situation at the docks, one that should keep Alessandro occupied for quite some time. Understanding dawned with sickening clarity. You created a diversion, Michael's smile widened. Smart girl. Alessandro always did have good taste in his acquisitions. What do you want? I asked, though I suspected I already knew. Insurance. Michael gestured to one of his men, who moved with surprising speed to grab my arm. Alessandro has something of mine. I'm simply acquiring something of his to ensure a fair exchange. I struggled against the iron grip on my arm. I'm nothing to him. Just an employee. Michael laughed, the sound chilling in its genuine amusement. We both know that's not true. Alessandro Castellano doesn't bring just employees to charity galas. Doesn't install them in private apartments. Doesn't kill men who look at them too long. The casual mention of murder stopped my struggling. What are you talking about? You really don't know? Michael seemed delighted by my ignorance. The bartender at Vito's, the one who made those comments about you the night before Alessandro first came in, found him in the river the next day. Or the delivery driver who accidentally brushed against you last month. Disappeared without a trace. Horror washed over me. You're lying, am I? Michael approached, lifting a lock of my hair with almost gentle curiosity. Alessandro has been watching you for nearly a year, Eleanor, learning your routines, your weaknesses, eliminating threats before they reached you. The wallet was just the final test before he made his move. The room seemed to tilt beneath my feet as pieces fell into place. Alessandro's intimate knowledge of my life, his perfectly timed appearance at Vito's, the way he'd always seemed to anticipate my needs and thoughts. Why? I whispered. Why me? Michael's expression turned calculating. That's the interesting question, isn't it? What makes you so special that the great Alessandro Castellano would spend months planning your acquisition? He shrugged. Perhaps he'll tell you himself. If he meets my demands, the man holding me produced a zip tie, securing my wrist behind my back with brutal efficiency. Don't worry, Michael said, noting my rising panic. We're not going to hurt you. You're much too valuable intact. Besides, he added with a cold smile, Alessandro would burn this city to the ground if you came back damaged. They led me to the elevator, my mind racing for escape options that didn't exist. As the doors closed, sealing me in with my captors, my last thought was of Alessandro, not fear of his wrath or hope for rescue, but a terrible suspicion that whatever game he'd been playing with me had finally reached its inevitable, bloody conclusion. The location they brought me to was a renovated warehouse by the river, its industrial exterior belying the luxurious apartment within. I was led to a sparsely furnished room, a bed, a chair, a small bathroom, and left alone after Michael informed me that Alessandro had been contacted with terms for my release. Hours passed in anxious solitude. I tested the door, locked, examined the windows, sealed and reinforced, and searched for anything that might serve as a weapon. Nothing. The zip tie had been replaced with handcuffs attached to a long chain bolted to the wall, enough freedom to use the bathroom and move around the room, but nothing more. When the door finally opened again, I expected Michael. Instead, a young woman entered carrying a tray of food, dark-haired, olive-skinned, with eyes that held both wariness and curiosity. You should eat, she said, setting down the tray. It's not poisoned. Who are you? I asked, keeping my distance. Lucia. She hesitated, then added, Michael's sister. I studied her, noting the absence of the cold calculation in Michael's eyes. Are you a prisoner too? A bitter smile twisted her lips. In a different way, perhaps. She gestured to the food. Eat. You'll need your strength. For what? Lucia's expression grew troubled. The exchange is scheduled for midnight. Until then, Michael wants you comfortable. Exchange? I repeated. What does Michael want from Alessandro? Territory. Control of the north side shipping routes. Lucia spoke matter-of-factly, as if discussing business rather than criminal enterprises. And revenge for our father. Your father? Alessandro killed him 3 years ago. The flatness in her tone couldn't quite mask the underlying pain, or ordered it done, which is the same thing in our world. I sank onto the edge of the bed, the reality of Alessandro's life. The life I'd willfully ignored, crashing down around me. I'm sorry about your father. Lucia's eyes narrowed. Are you? Your lover is a killer, Eleanor, a man who takes what he wants and destroys anyone who stands in his way. Then why am I still alive? I challenged. If I'm just another thing he wanted, why the elaborate game? Why not simply take me? Something shifted in Lucia's expression. Surprise, then a dawning understanding. You really don't know. It wasn't a question this time. Know what? She approached, studying me with new interest. Has Alessandro told you anything about his mother? Only that she died when he was young. Lucia nodded slowly. She was murdered. By my father. A warning to Alessandro's father about overstepping boundaries. She paused, letting the information sink in. Alessandro was 15. He found her body. My stomach twisted. What does this have to do with me? Look at yourself, Lucia said, gesturing to a mirror on the wall. Really look. I rose cautiously, moving to stand before the mirror. My reflection stared back. Pale skin, hazel eyes, dark blonde hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. The same face I'd seen countless times before. I don't understand, I said, turning back to Lucia. She pulled a phone from her pocket, scrolling briefly before holding it out to me. This is Maria Castellano, Alessandro's mother. The photograph showed a young woman, perhaps 30, with familiar hazel eyes and dark blonde hair. The resemblance to my own reflection was undeniable. Not identical, but striking enough to explain the shock I'd seen in Alessandro's eyes the first time he saw me. The way he'd studied me with something like recognition. This is why, Lucia said quietly. Why he watched you. Why he orchestrated your meeting. Why he's kept you close. She reclaimed her phone, tucking it away. You look like the mother he couldn't save. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. All this time, all the attention and protection, the possessiveness that verged on obsession. It wasn't about me at all. I was just a ghost, a replacement for a woman who died 20 years ago. Does Michael know? Lucia nodded. It's why he took you. Alessandro's mother was his weakness then. You are his weakness now. I'm not her, I said, anger rising through the shock. I'm not a replacement for his dead mother. Perhaps not intentionally, Lucia conceded. But we rarely understand our own motivations completely, do we? Especially when they're born from trauma. She moved toward the door. The food will get cold. Try to rest. Whatever happens tonight, it won't be peaceful. After she left, I stared at the food without appetite, my mind racing. If what Lucia said was true, and the resemblance in that photograph was too strong to deny, then everything between Alessandro and me had been built on a foundation of ghosts and revenge. His interest, his protection, even perhaps what he called love. All of it directed not at me, but at the shadow of his mother I unwittingly carried. The thought made me physically ill. Had every touch, every whispered endearment, been meant for someone else? Had I been nothing but a surrogate for a dead woman all along? And yet, I couldn't reconcile that cold calculation with the man who'd held me through nightmares about my mother's illness, who remembered my favorite childhood stories, who looked at me sometimes with a vulnerability that seemed too raw to be feigned. As night fell, bringing the promised exchange ever closer, I was left with the most terrifying question of all. If Alessandro came for me tonight, which man would I be facing? The one who claimed to love me, or the one who had orchestrated my entire existence in his life, for reasons I still couldn't fully comprehend? Time crawled by in that windowless room, minutes stretching into hours marked only by the steady ticking of a wall clock. My mind raced through every interaction with Alessandro, re-examining them through the lens of Lucia's revelation, the wallet test, his intimate knowledge of my life. The way his eyes sometimes lingered on me with an emotion I couldn't name, not desire, not affection, but something deeper and more painful. The door opened abruptly, startling me from my thoughts. Michael entered, his earlier casual demeanor replaced with tightly controlled tension. It's time, he said, gesturing to one of his men to unlock the chain from the wall. Alessandro has agreed to the exchange. What exactly are you exchanging me for? I asked as I was pulled to my feet. Michael's smile was thin. Insurance that Alessandro will honor our new arrangement regarding territory, and a digital ledger containing some rather incriminating information about my family's operations. He checked his watch. He should be quite motivated to comply, considering he has exactly 1 hour before certain evidence finds its way to federal authorities. They led me through the warehouse to a cavernous main floor, empty except for a few support columns and the ghostly shapes of covered machinery. The space was dimly lit, shadows pooling in the corners, the air cold and damp from the nearby river. Michael positioned me beside him in the center of the room, his men spreading out to create a loose perimeter. "He'll come alone?" I asked, already knowing the answer. Michael laughed. "Of course not. But his men will stay back, as will mine. This is between Alessandro and me now, with me as the bargaining chip." Precisely, his hand settled on my shoulder, a parody of comfort. "Although I confess I'm curious about what happens after he gets you back. Now that you know the truth about why he chose you." I stiffened. "Lucia shouldn't have told me. My sister has a soft heart," Michael agreed. "But I'm glad she did. I want you thinking about it when Alessandro looks at you. I want you wondering if he sees you at all, or just the ghost of Maria Castellano." Before I could respond, a door at the far end of the warehouse opened. Alessandro entered, moving with lethal grace, his expression carved from stone. Vincent and 2 other men flanked him, keeping a respectful distance as instructed. My breath caught at the sight of him. He wore all black, emphasizing the dangerous energy that radiated from him. His eyes scanned the room with clinical precision before landing on me, his gaze immediately cataloging every detail of my appearance, checking for injuries. "Alessandro!" Michael called, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. "Right on time." Alessandro approached slowly, stopping about 20 feet away. "Let her go, Russo. Business first," Michael countered. "The ledger." Without taking his eyes from mine, Alessandro removed a small flash drive from his pocket. "Release her, and it's yours." Michael's grip on my shoulder tightened. "How do I know it's the real thing? That you haven't altered the data? You don't." Alessandro's voice was cold. "Just as I don't know you'll honor your end of this agreement once you have what you want." A tense silence stretched between them, the air thick with barely restrained violence. "Compromise, then," Michael finally suggested. "Send the data to my phone. Once I verify it's legitimate, I'll release Eleanor." Alessandro's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "Fine." As the transaction proceeded, I studied Alessandro's face, searching for some sign of the truth. Did he see me when he looked at me, or just a shadow of his mother? Had everything, from the lost wallet to this moment, been part of an elaborate game fueled by trauma and revenge? "It's verified," Michael announced after a tense minute of examination. "All the data appears intact." He released his grip on my shoulder, giving me a slight push forward. "She's all yours, Castellano. Damaged goods now, I imagine, but still breathing." I moved slowly toward Alessandro, my legs unsteady. His expression remained impassive, but his eyes burned with an intensity that made my skin prickle. When I reached him, his hand settled at the small of my back, possessive, protective, familiar. "We're done here," Alessandro said, his voice deadly quiet. Michael's smile was triumphant. "For now. Though I am curious, does she know why you chose her? Why you've been watching her all these months?" Alessandro's body tensed against mine. "Careful, Michael. She should know she's just a replacement," Michael continued, seemingly unconcerned by the dangerous edge in Alessandro's voice. "A stand-in for a dead woman. Does she look enough like your mother when you're fucking her, Alessandro? Do you call her Maria in the dark?" Several things happened at once. Alessandro pushed me behind him with surprising gentleness. Vincent stepped forward, gun already drawn. And Michael's mocking smile froze as the distinct red dot of a laser sight appeared on his forehead. "That's enough," Alessandro said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "You have what you came for. Now leave while you still can." Michael's composure slipped for the first time, fear flashing briefly in his eyes as he realized how precarious his position had become. He raised his hands slowly. "We had an agreement." "The agreement was for the ledger in exchange for Eleanor," Alessandro replied. "Not for your continued ability to breathe. That remains entirely at my discretion." For a long, tense moment, I thought Alessandro would give the order, would have Michael executed right there. Instead, he turned to me, his back deliberately to Michael, the ultimate dismissal. "Let's go home," he said softly, his eyes searching mine. The drive back to the city passed in silence, Alessandro's hand clasping mine tightly, as if afraid I might disappear. It wasn't until we reached his penthouse, not my apartment, I noted, that he finally spoke. "Are you hurt?" he asked as the elevator doors closed behind us. "No," I stepped away from his touch, creating distance between us, not physically. His expression darkened at my withdrawal. What did they tell you? The truth, I said simply. About your mother. About why you chose me. Alessandro went still, the mask of control slipping to reveal raw pain beneath. It's not what you think. Isn't it? I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly cold. Your mother was murdered when you were 15. I look like her. You've been watching me for months before you arranged our meeting with the wallet. It seems pretty clear what this is. No. He moved toward me, stopping when I backed away. The resemblance. It caught my attention initially, I won't deny that. But it's not why you what? I interrupted. Why you orchestrated an elaborate scheme to bring me into your life. Why you gave me a job I wasn't qualified for. Why you moved me into an apartment you controlled. My voice cracked. Why you took me to your bed. Pain flashed across his features. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like, Alessandro? Explain it to me. Make me understand how this isn't the most twisted thing I've ever heard. He ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of agitation from a man who prided himself on control. Yes, I noticed you because you reminded me of her. But I watched you because you were different. Kind in a world that rewards cruelty. Honest in a world built on lies. He took a breath. The wallet was a test, yes. But not to see if you looked like her, or could replace her. To see if my instincts about your character were right. And if I had kept the wallet, I challenged. What then? Then I would have been disappointed, but not surprised. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. The world breaks good people, Ellie. I know that better than most. He moved to the window, gazing out at the city lights. When I was 15, I watched my mother die because she was kind to the wrong person, the wife of a rival who came to her for help. My father told me her compassion was weakness, that it got her killed. He turned back to face me. I believed him for years, built my empire on that belief, until I saw you, not just your face, but your actions, your kindness to your mother, to co-workers, to strangers, your integrity despite your circumstances. So what was this? I gestured between us, some experiment to see if kindness could survive in your world. No. He approached slowly, as if afraid I might bolt. It was me finding something I thought I'd lost forever. Hope, the belief that not everything good gets destroyed. He reached for my hand, and this time I didn't pull away. Yes. You remind me of her physically, but what drew me to you, what keeps me coming back, is that you're nothing like her in the ways that matter. She was gentle but weak. You're gentle but strong. She bent under pressure. You stand firm. His fingers brushed my cheek. When I look at you, Ellie, I see you. Only you. I wanted to believe him. Part of me did. But doubt had taken root, fed by Lucia's revelations and Michael's taunts. You should have told me. About all of it. The watching, the test, your mother. Yes, he agreed, surprising me. I should have. But I was afraid. You? Afraid? A bitter smile curved his lips, terrified. That you'd see the monster everyone else sees, that you'd run. That I'd lose the one person who looks at me and sees something worth saving. The raw vulnerability in his admission struck me more deeply than any declaration of love could have. This was Alessandro stripped of all pretense. Not the powerful Mafia boss, not the calculated businessman, but the wounded boy who had lost his mother and built walls to protect what remained of his heart. I can't go back to how things were, I said finally. Not now. I need time to think, to decide if I can trust you again. Pain flashed in his eyes, but he nodded. I understand. He stepped back, giving me space. You can stay in your apartment. I'll keep my distance until you're ready to talk. And if I decide I can't do this, can't be with you? His expression tightened, but his voice remained steady. Then I'll let you go. Your mother's care will continue. Your job will remain if you want it, or I'll find you another position elsewhere if you prefer. No strings, no conditions. Just like that? I couldn't keep the skepticism from my voice. No, he admitted, not just like that. It would destroy me to lose you, but I won't keep you against your will, Ellie. I'm not that kind of monster. The next week passed in a strange limbo. True to his word, Alessandro kept his distance, communicating only through necessary work emails and brief professional phone calls. I visited my mother daily, finding her health improved beyond what I dared hope thanks to the treatments Alessandro had arranged. During those quiet visits, sitting beside her bed as she dozed, I turned over everything in my mind. The deception, the manipulation, the unsettling parallel to his dead mother, but also the tenderness he'd shown me, the vulnerability he'd revealed only to me, the man beneath the monster everyone else saw. On the 8th day, I made my decision. I texted Vincent, not Alessandro, asking to meet his boss at the restaurant where it all began. Vito's was closed for a private event when I arrived, the dining room empty except for a single table in the corner, the same table where I'd first served Alessandro. He stood as I approached, tension evident in every line of his body. "Thank you for coming," I said, taking the seat across from him. "Thank you for asking me to." His eyes searched mine. "You look well." "I feel clearer." I folded my hands on the table. "I've been thinking about everything. About us. About what happens next." He nodded, waiting for me to continue, offering neither defense nor plea. "I'm angry that you manipulated our meeting," I began, "that you watched me without my knowledge, that you kept the truth about your mother from me. I deserved better than that." "Yes," he agreed quietly. "You did. But I also understand why you did it. How fear and trauma shape the ways we protect ourselves." I took a deep breath. "And I believe you when you say you see me for who I am now, not as a replacement for her." Hope flickered in his eyes, quickly tempered with caution. "What are you saying, Ellie?" "I'm saying I want to try again, from the beginning. No more secrets, no more half-truths." I met his gaze steadily. "I need to know who you really are, Alessandro. All of you, the good and the bad, the man and the monster." He reached across the table, his hand stopping just short of mine. "Ask me anything. I'll tell you the truth. Have you killed people?" No hesitation. "Yes." "How many?" 11 directly. More through my orders." I swallowed hard. "The bartender at Vito's? The delivery driver?" His expression remained impassive. "The bartender was attacking a woman behind the restaurant when my men intervened. He didn't survive the encounter. The delivery driver is alive and well in Arizona with a new identity and enough money to never work again. He was an undercover FBI agent." "And Michael Russo's father? Did you kill him?" "Yes." His gaze didn't waver. "He murdered my mother because she helped his wife escape an abusive marriage. He tied her to a chair and made her watch as he killed his own wife, then left my mother to bleed out slowly. I was at school. By the time I found her, she had been dead for hours. The clinical way he recounted such horror chilled me. And you took revenge. 3 years later, when I was strong enough." "Yes." "Would you do it again?" I asked. The most important question of all. He considered this, and I appreciated that he didn't rush to tell me what I wanted to hear. "I would kill to protect those I love," he finally said. "I would kill to avenge them, but I've learned there are better ways to handle most situations. Death is final. Fear and loyalty last longer." It wasn't the answer most women would want to hear, but it was honest. In his world, perhaps that was the best I could hope for. "One last question," I said quietly. "Do you love me? Not because I remind you of her, not because I passed your test, but for who I am." For the first time, emotion broke through his careful control. "I love you because you make me want to be better than I am," he said, his voice rough. "Because you see the darkness in me and still believe there's light worth saving. Because when I'm with you, I remember the man I wanted to be before the world taught me to be a monster." He finally reached for my hand, his fingers warm against mine. "I love you, Ellie Winters, for exactly who you are. And I will spend the rest of my life proving that to you if you'll let me." In that moment, I made my choice. Not with naivety about who he was or what he'd done, but with clear-eyed acceptance of the complicated, damaged man before me. The man who had orchestrated our meeting for reasons born of trauma, but had stayed for reasons born of love. "I love you too," I said, turning my hand to interlace our fingers. "The man and the monster. All of you. Relief washed over his features, followed by a fierce joy I'd never seen before. In one fluid movement, he rose and pulled me to my feet, drawing me against him. "I will never lie to you again," he promised, his forehead pressed to mine. "No more secrets. No more tests. No more watching from the shadows," I added. A smile curved his lips. No more shadows at all. When he kissed me, it felt like a beginning rather than a continuation. The first honest moment of a relationship built on truth instead of manipulation, on choice instead of orchestration. 6 months later, I stood in the quiet cemetery where Maria Castellano was buried, Alessandro's hand steady in mine as he introduced me to his mother for the first time. There was sadness in his eyes, but the haunted quality I'd first noticed had faded. "She would have loved you," he said, as we walked back to the car, fallen autumn leaves crunching beneath our feet. "Not because you look like her, but because you helped her son find his way back from the darkness." I squeezed his hand, the engagement ring he'd given me the week before, catching the afternoon sunlight. "We're still finding our way, together." That night, as we lay tangled in the sheets of what was now our bed, Alessandro traced the contours of my face with gentle fingers. "Thank you," he whispered. "For what?" "For returning more than just my wallet." He pressed his lips to my forehead. "For returning the parts of myself I thought were lost forever." I nestled closer, my head resting over his heart. Outside our window, the city sprawled in all its complicated glory, a place of darkness and light, danger and possibility, just like the man who held me, just like the life we were building together. A life that had begun with a test I hadn't known I was taking, but would continue with choices made in full awareness of their consequences. Choices made not in innocence, but in the hard-won wisdom that comes from seeing the truth and choosing love anyway. As sleep claimed me, I felt Alessandro's arms tighten around me, not possessive now, but protective, not controlling, but cherishing. The embrace of a man who had learned that the greatest strength lies not in power, but in vulnerability, not in fear, but in love. And in that moment, wrapped in the arms of a man the world called monster, but I called mine, I knew I was exactly where I was meant to be.